I started writing actually very young. I started writing when this thing happened to my eyes. When I was about 16 at school, I had this violent attack of keratitis, which I had to leave school because I became practically blind, and I had to learn Braille and to continue my education with tutors. And during that time I learned to use a typewriter. It was the only way I could write. And then I started to write. I actually wrote a whole novel at that period, which I never subsequently read. And this has disappeared. I rather regret that it has disappeared, because I would be interested to know what it was like now. It was a sort of romantic... no, it wasn't very romantic. It was a sort of rather bitter novel about a young man's relationship with the two different types of women, as I remember it. I discovered that I liked writing, that I had a certain gift for it. And I had, of course, before I went blind, intended to become a doctor. I presume if I had gone on with that, I would have gone into medical research, because I don't think I would have been a very good practicing doctor, but I might have been a fairly good medical researcher.
But why wouldn't you have been any good at medical practice?
I would have been good enough in sort of personal relationships, which I think are tremendously important in a good doctor. I mean, I was diffident and shy and awkward then. I think I've slightly improved with age, but I don't know that I would have been very good. But I think I would always been very interested in the research part of the thing. But anyhow, I couldn't go on with that kind of scientific career, because I couldn't use a microscope or do any of the necessary work in the laboratory. So that this determined my choice of a career, that I had to go into something else. And then I discovered that I could write, and that I did like writing. And from that time on, I always wrote a good deal. I wrote when I was an undergraduate. I wrote a lot of verse in those days. And then I also wrote a certain amount of prose. And I did publish my first prose book when was it? I think about 1920, I think, the first book of stories that I wrote.
How did you come to publish? Did you already know publishers, or did you write to them?
Well, I'd published a certain amount of verse in periodicals. I'd published two little volumes of verse with Blackwell at Oxford, and a certain amount had been published, as I say, in papers like The Nation and in art journals of different kinds. And I'd written a certain number of essays and stories which had been published. And I sent my first book of stories to Chatto and Windus, where Frank Swinnerton read them and set his seal of approval upon them, and I've been with Chatto's ever since. I've always enjoyed it. I've always, it never come very easily. I mean, all my thoughts, in a sense, are second thoughts. I tend to write everything over again. But I like it. It's laborious, but it's work which I find very rewarding and extraordinarily interesting. I mean, this seeking the right way of saying something. And I must say, I was very interested not long ago in looking over an old volume of essays which I'd written while at Oxford for my tutor. I took the English literature at Oxford, and these were essays on all sorts of literary subjects, I mean, from Chaucer down to the present day. And I was interested and surprised to find that I was writing quite well at that time. I mean, that I had a certain feeling for style, and that there was even a certain elegance in what I was doing, even at the age of 20, that I had obviously some kind of natural gift for writing. And although, as I say, it's always been a considerable work for me. I mean, it's this... I never get the results I want, except as a result of careful correction and going over and rewriting. I don't work out anything in great detail. I mean, I sort of start a thing and then it becomes clear that this has to be done, and I reach a point out in front, and therefore this means something at the back has to be changed, and it develops in this way. I don't work out a thing in any elaboration in advance.
Would you say that any one of your novels has been more real to you than another?
I think in some ways the Time Must Have a Stop was the one I enjoyed most of all doing.